Welcome to another of the Bhagavad Gita series. The last time we had looked at a section that ended with talk about how actions done for spiritual purposes are better than any other form of actions, and that taking action in general is better than trying to pretend to avoid action, because you can actually take action, but you can't actually avoid action. So that was where we left off. And now we're here at chapter 3, verses 10 to 12. In ancient times, having performed the spiritual rituals, the god Brahma said, "By these rituals, you shall be increasingly prosperous. Let the Spirit bring you to all good things." The divine spirits are pleased by ritual sacrifices. These spirits will reward you in return. By this mutual service, you will obtain the greatest of blessings. The spirits will provide you with all of the necessities of life, being in turn given what they need by your rituals performed in gratitude. But one who receives what is given in life by the spirits, without in turn giving thankful ritual, is certainly a thief. So, it does sound a bit like Krishna has suddenly gone off the rails here, right? Because until now, he'd been talking about this inner process, the inner journey, enlightenment, action and inaction, karma. This is really the first time he starts jumping into talking about spirits and rituals and things like that. So why does he? What does he mean by it? Well, keep in mind, Krishna had said just then that actions done for spiritual purposes are better than any other form of action, right? But you have to understand what spiritual purposes are. So spiritual purpose, I'd mentioned in the previous video, is all about totality, right? Completely engaging, what I call showing up, and being present in what you're doing for its own sake without any ulterior motive, right? Now suddenly you have Krishna talking about these relationships between the spirits and people. And he's quoting from ancient scriptures, presumably, and trying to put them into a correct context, right? Because keep in mind that at this time, Krishna was critical of the Vedic religion, the religion that was dominated, especially the priesthood. Just like pretty much any teacher, any enlightened teacher, spiritual teacher, cult leader, whatever you want to call them, they end up finding themselves at odds with the dominant priestly hierarchy. Because the dominant priestly hierarchy, the last thing they're really about is enlightenment, right? They're always about some form of social control, some form of dogma, hierarchy, orthodoxy, that sort of thing. I'm not saying that hierarchy is necessarily bad or even orthodoxy, but that these things tend to be counterproductive without, in the spiritual context, without an actual real sage, a real teacher in charge. And that's because as soon as you get people who aren't actually there yet, you know, if you're talking about enlightenment and you get people who end up in charge of an organization long after a real teacher's dead, right, and they're not enlightened, then what do you have? You've got a priesthood, right? And that priesthood, they're going to want to keep being the ones that are in charge of this religious movement. And they don't really want someone showing up and saying, well, you know what, I'm enlightened now, and so I actually know the things you're talking about, because that takes away all of their monopoly, right? Their monopoly on spirit. So these priests at the time, the Vedic Brahmins, were stating that if you performed certain rituals, they were interpreting the Vedas in the way that if you perform certain rituals, you'll be rewarded materially. You'll be rewarded with material prosperity of different kinds, right? And Krishna, he's very clever about the way he phrases these three verses. He doesn't directly attack that idea. But instead, he kind of redirects the quote to mean something completely different than what the priest means, right? Because he says, in ancient times, having performed these spiritual rituals, the god Brahma said, by these rituals you shall be increasingly prosperous. Let the spirit bring to you all good things. Divine spirits are pleased by ritual sacrifice. These spirits will reward you in return, and by mutual service you'll obtain the greatest of blessings, right? So he says, the way you live your life has to be a ritual, that it has to be an act of devotion. So the ritual sacrifices that you're doing here, that he's talking about, the ritual service, is not about burning incense and making prayers in a temple. It's about the sacrificing of attachment, right? It's about being total. It's about overcoming the lust of result, moving away from your own space and opening up a space for devotion, right? So the spirits, life, God, this hierarchy of forces are ever present. They're all over the place. There's no place that they're not, right? So what's the purpose of ritual? How are you grateful or not grateful? What is giving thankful ritual and what isn't, right? Well, if you're dealing with ritual as a business negotiation, I will pray to you 1,000 Hail Marys if you make sure that my son wins the big game on Saturday, right? That's a business negotiation. There, you're making a business deal there. That's not religion. That's certainly not spirituality. It's definitely not enlightenment, right? It's not even religion though. Like it's just negotiation, right? You're engaging in a business transaction with God, and so this is not an actual thankful ritual, right? A thankful ritual is where you are recognizing and dedicating all action and all of your totality to this union with the divine, with everything, right? If you're doing that, that's thankful ritual. It's where there's no space for where you are and where God isn't, right? Where the divine isn't, where the oneness isn't, whatever you want to call it, right? The real point isn't really what you want to define that thing out there. It's what you're doing in here that matters, right? And so if you address religion karmically, if in the sense of wanting, through lust of result, wanting cause and effect, then you're not being thankful. Right? You're not actually engaging in devotion of any kind. You're not worshiping or being a devotee or praising or anything like that. You're fulfilling a contractual negotiation, right? And that's exactly not what Krishna is advising, right? So the real sacrifice isn't if you slaughter a pig or burn incense or offer fruit or something like that, right? The sacrifice is of the definition you have of yourself as separate from the divine, as separate from the universe. But if you take what the Spirit gives you, which is everything, right? Because there's nothing that is not the Spirit, and then refuse to make the sacrifice of giving up that wanting to define yourself as apart from reality or all of reality being focused on you, then that's what makes you a thief, as Krishna puts it. So, and it means that nothing that you do in spirituality will actually work. There'll be no way to appreciate it because you're stealing from your own sense of union, right? You're the cause of your own suffering, as the Buddha would say a few hundred years later, right? Your own lust of result, your own desire, your own attachment is what creates the separation that causes you the suffering that leads you to think that if you can just get things on your own terms in some way, then that's going to solve everything, right? So it's a cycle. That is the karmic wheel defined. And if instead of trying to steal this possessiveness of the world, this trying to own reality, trying to own God, trying to own spirituality, you can just accept the gift of life that has no requirement attached to it except showing up, except being there, then if you can do that, you can achieve that transcendent state and break down all those fantasies and achieve awakening, achieve union. So that's everything for today.